Welcome back. Eskom's power outages have had a knock-on effect on the economy, with businesses losing money, the rand weakening, and many mines having to suspend their operations. Now, the Minerals Council of South Africa says that the power utility sent out a notice on Monday to some of the key industrial users, asking them to cut down their operations to essential service levels only. Now, the Minerals Council represents 90% of the mines in South Africa, and joining us now to discuss how these operations have been affected is Henk Langenhoven, a chief economist at the Minerals Council of South Africa. He's also an advisor to the Presidency. So let's hear from him. Thanks so much for your time this morning.
Morning. Thank you.
So let's just start with when business receives the notice. What exactly happened on Monday, and what did that mean for the mining operations in the country?
Well, essential services means literally you keep the pumps on to pump water out, and you pump cooling air down the shafts, and you take people out. You stop production immediately. So what happened was the night shift could not remove the blast ore the previous night. So the day shift had to go down and try and make certain, the engineers went down, make certain it was safe, and had to prepare, and then the next night shift, only when the situation got back to stage 4, they could go down and start removing the ore. So a whole process is disrupted, and I'm not talking even about the actual production that's not happened, or always for us the fear of the safety of our people. So really a bit of a shock to the system.
And, you know, one has to ask what sort of impact that has, not only on the sector, you know, given the sort of communication that would happen amongst your members, but also to the economy of the country.
Well, we produce, it's difficult to work out exactly what the cost was. What we produce about 350 billion rands worth of value add to the economy. And if you lose one day, I mean, just a simple calculation then says it could be as high as $1 billion, but not all the mines were influenced, especially the open cast mines. They use their equipment and they keep going. And so most of the coal mines for that matter. But still a disruption. I think the biggest issue is, on the one hand, the uncertainty of how long this is going to continue, because you have to take a decision on the next shift. Are you going to send them down? Because there may be another weakening of the situation, then you bring them out and then you lose them as well. So that is a big issue, because planning and the processes, there's a certain amount of blasting taking place, a certain amount of rock comes up, a certain amount of it is crushed, it has to go to the smelters. And remember, when the biggest users at a mine are actually the smelters and the refineries. They use about half of the electricity. So normally when Eskom asks for us to save electricity, that's what is curtailed. And they are sensitive. They talk about them like the sailors. They talk about them they call them she. And she can't be switched off from 140 degrees to 100. You have to put her on care and maintenance, and that's a big process. It's a ripple effect down the mine and out the mine of what you have available.
Well, you've been concerned about these power interruptions. You've also been concerned about the cost of energy. And earlier in the year, you know, when NERSA made that announcement as the Minerals Council, you actually came out and expressed that concern. So when things are the way they are right now, you know, where does that leave the industry and also your continued support for the South African economy?
Well, it is a cost issue. Our electricity rose by more than 5 times over the last 8 years, and we see that there's another regulatory clearing account application from Eskom, which simply means that they're trying to claim back the income that they thought they would have and didn't realize. And mining is about a commodity that we produce that we can't control the price. So gold or platinum or iron ore prices are determined in international markets, but costs are domestic. And a lot of the domestic costs are linked to the state-owned enterprises. We buy about 45% of our products and services, in other words, the cost structure, if you keep labor aside, from the state in terms of transport on rail, the harbors, electricity, fuel, transport costs, etc. So a large proportion of our costs are really not in our control, which makes this such a vital issue. And we consume, it's the other way around as well, we consume about 30% of Eskom's power. So we are the baseload customer that actually pay our bills. And for them and for us, it's a symbiotic relationship. Of course, we provide 90% of the coal to the power stations, which is the other side of this. It isn't going that well, and again, it differs from commodity to commodity. To give you an idea, the export price of coal at Richards Bay dropped by 40% since October last year. We know the chrome price is under pressure. Platinum and gold went up quite dramatically yesterday and recently, but that interplay between what we get for our product and convert it into rand. The rand exchange rate is another important factor in the middle. And then these costs that are rising and that we don't have much control over. The net result is the squeezing of our margins. And we know that we talk about marginal mines, and we mean by that the difference between what they earn and what their costs are is in order of 5%. When you're at that stage, it is not certain whether you will go on and develop that mine further. And these fluctuations, and seeing that it's about 10-15% overall of mining cost, it's much more for a smelter, has a big influence on that margin. And the moment you start and wonder, but am I going to keep on mining? Am I going to keep on investing in it or not doing it? The uncertainty around the employees that are in that situation becomes an issue. So this is, in the softest way of saying it, not helpful at all.
So when you say that about 90% of Eskom's coal is supplied by your members, Eskom, one of the reasons they've cited right now is wet coal. So what are your members telling you? Why are they not able to make sure that the coal is of a quality that Eskom can actually use to keep the lights on?
Virtually every company that we spoke to were running at 100%, the coal companies. So there was flooding. If you read the press releases, there were flooding at the power stations. Now remember, it's like having a pile of wood. The higher the pile, the more likelihood it is that you can get dry wood from the bottom of it. And it rained, and it seems as if it flooded the stockpiles, and that caused the problem. But the mines were not that much influenced by the rain. They could provide and could run at virtually full capacity.
So the problem was not from the mines; it was with Eskom, is what you are saying, and how they actually keep the coal.
Yeah, it was the coal getting wet along the way. That's really the problem. And like with any fire, if everything is wet, you struggle to lit the fire.
Wow. And these are some of the questions that we, trying to get to the bottom of with regard to something like wet coal, because one would think that in 2019 we would have some form of way of preventing that. We can't be talking about Eskom having to ramp up to stage 6 load shedding because of wet coal.
Yeah, look, it was a confluence of very unfortunate issues, not only the coal. I think the coal was just one issue eventually, but they had breakdowns. And I really think one should talk about the fact that there is virtually no margin for error. Eskom is struggling to provide what is needed for the economy to utilize the current capacity of the economy. If you listen to the manufacturers, they are running at way below their capacity, and when anything goes wrong, their plans are such that they take some capacity offline to be able to do maintenance. And then the plant that they are relying on during that period then breaks down. And Jan Oberholzer has been saying several times, he always used the two words, it's unreliable and unpredictable. So they don't know, because of the lack of maintenance, what is going to break down and how much. And what has happened now is they had something like 11 or 12,000 megawatts breaking down. They had a certain number of megawatts out for maintenance, and then the rain came, and they had that problem at Medupi. So the real issue is the margin for error and the margin for some of these eventualities. And we just cannot run, the economy cannot run at this, I almost want to call it a scary level of capacity available. It's well known, and it's been said in the IRP and in the roadmap for Eskom, that we immediately need between 2,000 and 5,000 megawatts extra to alleviate that, to give us a cushion, that when something goes wrong, you have actually capacity that you can put into the system. And that is really the issue for where we are. There's a longer term issue as well. We need to replace the old plant by 2025, and the number is 11,000 megawatts, which, and it's only 4.5 years away. It is actually really a serious issue that the whole country actually needs to think about.
And staying with this power issue and Eskom's inability to essentially keep the lights on and keep those plants rolling, the cost of coal is another factor. And as you said, 90% of Eskom's coal comes from your members. What do they say about this? Because there are others who are not members of the Minerals Council who are saying actually they can supply coal at a cheaper rate to Eskom. So what are your members saying?
The irony is that the contract mines and the tied mines, as they were called, actually kept prices of coal rising at about the inflation rate for a very long time. And with all the shenanigans at Eskom, a number of those long-term contracts have been cancelled, and it was opted for buying from smaller companies. Transport costs got more, etc., etc. But what also happened towards the end of 2018, Eskom was renegotiating and going back to a lot of the longer term and contracted mine contracts. But at the end of 2018, Eskom was in the worst position in terms of stock at the power station. So, and at that time, coal prices peaked. In October 2018, coal prices peaked at $100 a ton. So they were renegotiating these contracts in actually quite a weak situation. Prices were high. We could export. India is competing for the thermal coal that we can export, and so they were in a weak position. But the adjustment started back to the more contract mines, which is able to provide much lower coal because it's volume and it's closer by the power station. So transport cost is a conveyor belt is the cheapest. So. The prices have risen internationally. There was international competition, but there was a lot of structural issues within the coal supply environment that shifted, and if you look at in the latest situation, caused prices to rise slightly. But if you look at the situation before the scandals around the corruption on procurement broke. And it's actually well documented in the NERSA documentation that Eskom is allowed a certain volume of coal at a certain price per ton. And in many of the previous years, they bought less coal because the generation capacity wasn't necessary or wasn't there at much higher prices. So the total cost is the price times the volume. And that caused the cost of what they call primary energy to go up faster than the CPI. But it is an issue, and I can assure you the mining companies are doing their damnedest to actually get, firstly, that they have it, but at the best price that's possible.
It is definitely an issue, because at a dinner that you hosted earlier in the year, Minister Pravin Gordhan actually made this point and saying that you need your members in this instance to, and I want to quote him, you need to balance what you do in respect of shareholder expectations and societal expectations, because, you know, when all is well and you're making tons of profits, I mean, all is good, but at a time like this, one would expect your members to come on board as well and do what they can to alleviate the situation.
Look, of course, it's individual contracts with Eskom. They have been negotiating on an individual basis, and that is actually a problem for us to, as a group. The Competitions Act actually does not allow a group of companies to talk to their client as a group. The individual contracts that have been signed by Eskom is the governance situation, and if anything can happen on this or must happen on this, it has to be individual contracts with the companies. True, but how do you tell the coal company that they must drop their profits because the gold company needs the cheaper electricity? It is not a simple issue, and it is certainly something that the companies are sensitive to. There has been some negotiations, but it is on an individual basis with Eskom. It cannot be as a group.
How's this affecting the job situation? Because yesterday we heard from Richards Bay Minerals, they're going to be cutting some jobs. We've been hearing, you know, on an ongoing basis from the mining sector that they will be cutting jobs as a result of many factors, but of course this being one of them.
I would think the Richards Bay one, and I'm not completely on top of that information, but the Richards Bay one may be that there's less exports going through Richards Bay at the moment. Some of it because we can't get the coal there, but there has been some decline, as I said to you, in the price of coal at Richards Bay. So that's an issue. But the others, I mean, in general, it's the gold companies that are losing employment and the platinum companies. Coal has been quite well and been contributing generally to employment increases, so as chrome, so as iron ore. So it's a varied, again, depending on what happens with the price, what happens with the cost, the situation is not uniform right through. But we have been losing, it's stabilized a bit, but we have been losing some employment, and the quarterly employment survey, I think, comes out tomorrow. So we would be able to have an update on that. It's stabilized, it's not that bad, but it is precarious, if I can put it.
So finally, if you had a magic wand, what would you do? What needs to happen right now?
You know what, and it's a personal view, and I have no right to say it on behalf of the mineral sector, but I think if Eskom comes to us and say, listen, we need 4,000 megawatts more to do the maintenance that needs to be done, and the country says, okay, we as different sectors, society, etc., let's organize it properly and let's give them the scope to do that. I think it is possible for us to stop this snowball, because the fact that we're not doing enough maintenance is like a snowball causing problems that we don't foresee and we can't see, and it can become bigger and bigger, and you can have this coincidence of sad situations where there is simply nothing to actually put into the grid. But South Africans are good at standing together. We will have to take some costs. Someone asked me yesterday, but can we switch off the mining sector for a week? The mining sector is dead when that happens. But if you switch a household off, the same thing happens. But if we can share this burden and give them the scope, because it cannot go on that they falling behind in maintenance. The country cannot handle that. It'll just become worse. The old American saying, "You kick the can down the road," and that it can't last forever.
Well, thank you so much for your time this morning, Henk Langenhoven, Chief Economist at the Minerals Council of South Africa, talking to us about the impact of the latest round of load shedding and the impact it's had on the mining industry. It's time for news with Leanne.